Suzanne takes you down to her place near the river.
I think the most important thing for people like you and me is to set the intention and challenge people to come up with a solution. And if we keep the intention clear, the intention of compassion for ourselves, respect for others, a hope for a more just and peaceful future, and the strategies necessary, whatever they may be, to achieve a future where everybody feels welcome at the table and everyone has opportunity and everyone feels respected. If those are the stories we look for, stories of transformation from pain and struggle to hope, from the dark night of the soul into a new and more robust and resilient wholeness, I think if we keep telling those stories, we'll find the solutions.
That was Tim SHRIVER, our guest on today's podcast.
And you want to travel with her, and you want to travel blind, and you know that she will trust you.
Welcome to the Sue Speaks podcast, searching for unity in everything. I'm your host, Suzanne Taylor. How can we turn the world around? Can we turn the world around? That's what I talk to my thought-shaping guests about. In fact, everything I've done has been in pursuit of the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, buoyed up by that famous quote by Margaret Mead, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." When I come across someone on my wavelength, it's unmistakable. I had that feeling when I found Tuesdays with Tim online and got introduced to Tim SHRIVER, whose father started the Peace Corps and whose mother founded the Special Olympics that Tim now chairs. I believe Tim is a force for our time. He says he, quote, learned the most from the vulnerable and forgotten on the edge of life, whom I had been raised to help. Quite some directive for the nephew of President Kennedy, whose mother, Eunice, was Jack Kennedy's sister. Tim's new project is The Call to Unite, which is a beautiful book that he co-edited. The subtitle is Voices of Hope and Awakening, and it consists of incredibly moving short pieces by people who ranged from ex-presidents to ex-cons, giving, quote, messages of inspiration, transformation, and love, a book of wisdom to turn to in hard times, filled with prayers, poems, spiritual insights, and lessons to live by. It's such a wonderful book. And it's part of Tim's effort to create a movement to deal with a crisis of our national spirit. Oh gosh, that appeals to me so. And when you get on his homepage of Unite, and it's unite.us, Unite Us, how fortuitous. It's an initiative to promote national unity and solidarity across distances. That's a quote. That's what Unite is. And he co-founded that. And in big bold letters, when you get on the homepage, it says, join in the movement to unite as one. Tim, I'm in. It's just what we need. And may your auspice be the one that sends us into that more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. Here's the bio of Tim on the flap of the book. Tim SHRIVER is the founder of Unite, the longtime chair of Special Olympics, a best-selling author, a former teacher, a founding force of the social and emotional learning movement, a film producer, a husband, father, and grandfather, and a seeker of unity in society and in himself. Now, if you get on another bio, you'll find more. There's a speakers bureau that has him as evangelist, I like that one, and corporate speaker. And I've seen him cited as doing work with at-risk teenagers in low-income neighborhoods. Surprising, huh? But not so when you really tune into what he is all about. So Tim, enough for me. So how about bringing us up to date about what's central to you now? I mean, particularly what got you so gutsy as to issue that directive to unite. And also talk about what made you decide, among all the things that could be done, what made you decide to do that book?
Well, first of all, thank you, Suzanne. Thank you for that beautiful introduction and for the heart with which you introduce me and the heart with which you introduce your work and your own mission and passion, and the guts and bravery it takes to say it's just a small group. We're all a little bit in a world where the number of likes we get and the number of clicks we get seems to be, in some sense, an indication of our value, our worth. And in so many ways, it takes a bold and brave soul to say, no, it's not about that. It's about the truth we tell. It's about the small band of committed followers we're able to join with. It's about the power of our mission, however small it may seem in a moment in time. Its power to motivate, animate, and transform the world is what matters, whether we have 2 likes or 2 million likes. So anyway, I just want to thank you for the introduction. I think we're at a moment culturally, politically, religiously, maybe even we could say racially, although sometimes, it's hard for people with my background to speak with any authority on matters of race. But I think broadly speaking, we're at a moment where the fractures, where the tension, where the disrespect and brokenness between us threatens the future of us. I call it a spiritual crisis, not because I want to be religious or even to tap into the current spiritual movements, although many I think are quite beautiful and striking, but rather because I think it is a moment in which the depth dimension of human life is at stake and is the central field at which we need to change. I think we're hungering, starving for a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves, starving to understand how to find peace within ourselves, starving to feel that respect and belonging between us. These are deep, deep emotional hungers. They're very human. They're not relegated to a small group of people from this denomination or that denomination. They're us. They're empirically us. This is who we are. We are beings who hunger, who starve for truth, for beauty, for goodness, for belonging, for love. That's the fact. And we can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. We have no choice. We were made for each other. We are made for this larger reality. We don't survive without a connection to one another and to the whole. Now, it doesn't have to be everything. We don't all have to walk around hugging trees or reaching our arms out into a communion of the whole, but we have to have a cultural setting. We have to have stories we tell each other that remind us that we're safe together and that we're intentionally working for the larger good of each other. We can compete in our businesses or carve out our territory or put our fences around our lawns or whatever, buy our own cars. I'm not suggesting that all that goes away. But that by itself is a recipe for chronic loneliness, heartbreaking anxiety and fear, and soul-crushing despair. Individualism that has run into and become the individualization of all meaning and purpose and value is killing us, literally. It is addicting us. It is depressing us. It is creating violence between us. And in many cases, increasingly, even leading us to kill ourselves. So I just feel like it's all very big picture, right? You can say, well, what the hell are you talking about? What in God's name does this mean for my life? And we can get into that. But I feel like if we know the problem, we can solve it. And we can solve it at the level at which it exists. You mentioned, my dad's work in the Peace Corps, my mom's work in creating Special Olympics. These were both powerful organizations that had one thing in common. They were trying to create patterns where people would heal division. I mean, the Special Olympics movement is just a way of bringing people who are divided together. It looks like you're doing a track meet or a soccer game, but what it really is it's a meeting ground for healing. You're different from me. I'm scared of you. You don't understand me. You have humiliated me. Let's meet. Let's play. Let's cheer. Let's celebrate each other. And before you know it, half of the people in a soccer game are in tears. Why? Because something has spoken to their heart. Same thing with the Peace Corps. Same thing with many other organizations. So this is the kind of energy I think we need. I know I need it. Let's put it that way. Let me make this selfish. Here you are, you and me. I think we both need it, right? So we're the beginnings of, we're not the only ones, of course, but we're a small group of committed people. And we are willing to take a stand for this hunger for healing in our culture.
Gosh, I could just sit here and listen to you and never talk. So. Tim, did you ever want to run for president?
No.
I think you would make a perfect president because you come from a world that understands power, that isn't naive. And you've got this deep spiritual nature. We don't have anybody in politics really, really, really like that in a high position in politics.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's very flattering. Politics, I'm sorry to say, does not reward uniters. It doesn't reward healers. It doesn't reward bridge builders. It doesn't reward educators, really. It rewards dividers. It rewards people who are able to demonize the other effectively. Now, that doesn't mean that's true of all politicians, because I know, like, and indeed love many people who have been in politics. But anyway, it's just a long way of saying the work that has most animated my soul has been less oriented towards the political realm. But I think we're at a new point, in our book, The Call to Unite, which I hope people will get, and I hope your listeners will enjoy. One of the contributions is by Oprah Winfrey, where she writes about a country having an inner life. When you think about the inner life, usually you think about your inner life or my inner life, or your husband or your child or your neighbor or whoever it is, your colleague's inner life. But she writes that a whole nation can have an inner life. In some ways, we are in a transformative, we're in an almost a dark night of our own collective inner life. When the moorings, when you read St. John of the Cross or other people who have written about the dark night, part of what you hear in their descriptions of these things is the loss of foundations. Things that seemed to work for you psychologically don't work anymore. The story you had that brought you to the point where you are all of a sudden disappears. The consolations that you used to rely on no longer seem to make sense. And all of a sudden you're a little bit cast out, a little bit rudderless, a little bit lost, or maybe a lot lost, depending how you look at it. Now, one thing that if we are in a collective dark night, we can know that it's going to hurt. That's what we know from great saints of all traditions. Even the most faithful people, Mother Teresa appears to have had her own dark night, and others, people who have significant experiences with depression. It's not the same as the dark night, but it has some similarities. And the restructuring, the rebuilding of a sense of purpose, of story, will challenge us if we're going to come out of this stronger, more whole, more grounded in a reality deeper. I think you're right. That's what we're looking for now. We've had belonging, we've had faith, we've had stories, but what we have never had is a story that includes everyone. We've had beautiful stories of the resilience, the strength, the faith of people of color in this country over 400 years. Beautiful stories of the triumph of evangelical communities and their great contributions to the country. And you could go all the way down the list, the Irish, the Italians, people that arrived here fleeing tremendous suffering in their homelands. We have stories, but what we don't have is a story that includes everyone. It's always been a little bit of, or a lot of, us versus them. It's been a story, sorry to say, largely that's privileged, almost exclusively privileged men, white men, heterosexual white men born to an upper class. Guess who that sounds like? Me. That's all me. I've had people like me have had all the advantages and all the participation, the belonging, the trust, the opportunity. But often people like me have held that close to themselves and said, it's our group against others. What we're trying to figure out right now, I think, is how do we build a sense of belonging without a sense of exclusion? And this is a big challenge. I mean, the biblical writers go back to this and they talk about the scapegoat, that, well, you can't do this without having a few scapegoats, without having villains. You know what people will say to you? All we need to unite our country is a common enemy. Guess what? All we need to divide our country is a group of common enemies, because that's what we've got right now. If you're a Democrat, here's who your enemy is: Trump voters. If you're a Trump voter, here's who your enemy is: liberal elitists. If you're a farmer, here's who your enemy is: the urban elites. If you're an urban elite, here's your enemy: people driving pickup trucks on farms and drilling for oil. I mean, we've divided the field so effectively that we find our belonging in the hatred of others, instead of what we're trying to figure out, which is how do we find a sense of belonging without demonizing anyone. That's new in some ways in the human experience. And that's why I think it's so tough.
One of the, indeed, and the idea about a common enemy, was that Eisenhower who was pointing to, if the aliens came, now that would be a kind of common enemy we could unite against, even though.
Well, you think that would be the case, but we had COVID. And you'd think that was a common. Well, the reason we did the Call to Unite as a show, and the reason we have this book, The Call to Unite, Voices of Hope and Awakening, was because we thought, perhaps naively, that COVID, everybody would know that we want to unite against that. I mean, how could you possibly split the difference? How could we possibly end up in a war of us versus them against a killer disease that no one wants to protect COVID, right? No one's out to defend COVID. So we thought, many of us thought, my goodness, here's finally, this is not another nationality, another race, another religion, another belief system, another whatever. It's nothing like that. It's just a common enemy. We can unite. No, doesn't work. Didn't work. Immediately the fault lines appeared, and people were more eager and willing to demonize others than they were to fight the disease itself. I mean, it's shocking, but it's true.
Well, it may not be the end of story yet. I'm tuned into that same wavelength of, oh my God, this will turn out to be a blessing. I mean, we're in these dramatic times, and this will be a dramatic blessing that will finally unite us. And maybe the fact that it hasn't so far means that it's still got its work to do. Sir Ken Robinson, God bless him, his last speech, the great teacher and creative thinker, gave his last presentation for the Call to Unite, and it's in the book. And one of the questions he asks is, other people say we need a new normal. And Sir Ken simply asks, just what kind of new normal do we want to have? And that's the question we all have to ask. No one can say we want the old normal. Yes, we want some pieces of it. Sure, we'd like to go to the ball game. Sure, we'd like to see our children or our grandchildren or our friends. And sure, I want to do all that. I want to go to a restaurant. I want to go to a ball game. I want to get in my car and go to the beach and things like that. I want to do all those things. Maybe someday go to the theater. I mean, these are all things that we used to do that we want to do again. Go to church, in my case. But we don't want the old normal. We want a new normal. And that should be, I hope, the question in all of our hearts right now. What can I do? And this book has beautiful recommendations for gratitude practices from Jewel, and sharing your story from Daniil Schmall, and how to manage and learn from pain from Bishop T.D. Jakes, and how to listen for the sound of angels from the great star Common, and how to have a political vision that allows us to come together from Presidents George W. Bush and Bill Clinton, saying this together. So the stories of our country, the hunger of our elite, there are people in the book who have spent 10 years in maximum security prisons, and there's people in the book who have spent their whole lives in mansions. But they are sharing their deepest desire, their deepest sense of the possibility of now. And you don't have to have a label on your back, and you don't have to exclude someone because of the label you put on their back in order to have a vision of us, in order to have a sense of the possibility that our faith in each other and our hope for a more just and peaceful future can bring us together
if we understand and listen deeply to what matters most for all of us. The book is one beautiful selection, if you ask me, of over 100 people who are, I like to think of them as friends you haven't met, who will join you on your bedside table or on your coffee table. And, I like to remind people, Suzanne, many of the chapters are only a page. So a lot of people like me, they don't want, you get in bed at night, you don't want to read a long book. Maybe you don't have the energy for that. But I dare people, open to any page. And if you don't find something powerful, meaningful, and exciting to you, alluring to you, send me the book and I'll send you your money back. That's the way I think of it. It's that universal a story that people shared. And it took a lot of bravery. Many of the authors even say in their selections, I'm taking a chance on sharing this part of myself. Amy Grant says that. I'm not sure if people are going to make fun of me because of what I'm sharing in this book, but here it is. And she puts her heart and soul on the page, and it's just gorgeous. I mean, breathtaking.
This is such a really powerful book. It's education. The more you take in what's good, it's like evolution's moving that way. So you get tuned into the forward motion, which is better, which is more united. I wanted to ask you what you thought, in looking for what we can do to turn the world around, and heaven knows, look at your entire bio and everything you've done as part of that. But what about something really dramatic? Do we have time for all of this beautiful motion that we're in many different quarters to keep making it better, this huge thrust of that? But then again, you look at the clock or the calendar, or, you say, oh my God, we're so vulnerable now that we're so united in technology. We're so vulnerable to something horrible happening. What can we do to quickly move us into a different mindset where we aren't oppositional, like all those examples you gave, but where we are together? My main thought, and I want to check it out with you and see if you have one or another one. What about some kind of universal basic income for everybody in the world? You give everybody food, shelter, education, healthcare, and then you have a world that isn't stuck in this struggle, people struggling to survive. Okay, now we have a playing field. Everybody can enter the field, just like Maslow's hierarchy. If survival is your issue, you can't pay attention to higher, spiritual practices or needs. And Tim, you're a good one to ask that because, you come from a power world. Could we do that? Bucky Fuller said we could do that. We always take him as a wonderful authority. In Grinch of Giants, his last book, he said, we have enough. We could do that for everybody in the world. With all the billionaires in the world, which makes you a little sick to even think about. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, but
no, it's striking.
If all those people got together, all the billionaires said, okay, we'll stay rich, we'll keep a certain amount, but the rest of it, we're going to turn over to shifting this worldview. And to me, the first place to go is this equalizing, bringing people out from deprivation so that they can even be in the game. Do the billionaires have enough money?
The billionaires, I think one of the statistics I saw is that, just in the last year, the billionaire class has made more money than the rest of the world combined. That's like 300 people have made more money than all the rest of the humanity combined. Their wealth has increased by something like $1 trillion, just 100 people. So there's clearly something in the system. I'm not an economist. When people say we have to tax, we have to restrict it to some extent, the gathering of wealth by the small numbers of people. We have to do something. Most of the people I know that have access to those people think they agree. I don't have personal relationships with people in that class, but from what I read, Warren Buffett has said this doesn't work. I mean, he makes billions and billions of dollars every year. He says, I pay less taxes than my secretary. I mean, that's the system. That's the lawmakers. That's the political class that's allowed that to happen. I mean, we elect them, so it's our fault too. So we're all responsible, but we've got to take that on. I mean, we just can't survive with that concentration of wealth being so wildly unfair. I mean, this is a country that wants to celebrate people who do well. And, a lot of people in our country love the idea of getting rich, and more power to them. That's it's a beautiful ambition, and it's a distant dream for many, but why not hope for a day when you have the wealth that can allow you to live easily? There's nothing, in my view, at least, wrong with that. At the same time, we don't need a system that makes it so easy for people at the top to make so much money and so backbreakingly difficult for people trying to get a leg up to even get one step up the ladder.
It is actually absurd when you reflect on this, that what are we doing with these billionaires? Have how much money and how much compared to everybody? What? And there is that movement among the Buffett types to actually rail against their own privilege and turn it around and put it into service. I don't know enough about economics to know if they have enough to save the world, so to speak. And why not? The government isn't really, it's not like, oh, they're going to take care of us. No, I just mentioned bombing Syria was a very disappointing thing. Like, oh my God, we're going to still make war after COVID. Yeah. Oh my God, I thought maybe we're going to not make war anymore. Oh, no, we didn't get it yet. What about, as one methodology, possible, salvation methodology, if the billionaires really got together and said, okay, we're all going to take care of you now. Now the government's not going to do it, but we're going to do it.
I think the most important thing for people like you and me is to set the intention and challenge people to come up with a solution. And if we keep the intention clear, the intention of compassion for ourselves, respect for others, a hope for a more just and peaceful future, and the strategies necessary, whatever they may be, to achieve a future where everybody feels welcome at the table and everyone has opportunity and everyone feels respected. If those are the stories we look for, the stories of transformation from pain and struggle to hope, from the dark night of the soul into a new and more robust and resilient wholeness, I think if we keep telling those stories, we'll find the solutions. As you've pointed out, time is short. We have no time to waste in this work. And I encourage you, keep putting that out there. And maybe someone listening will say, I know how to make that happen. I'm going to call Suzanne, or I'm going to call my friend. And that's just, this is it. It's my moment now. This is your moment now. People listening, this is your moment now. Don't wait any longer. This is the chance we have. This is the time of great disruption. This is the time of great opportunity for change, for transformation. Don't waste it.
I couldn't agree more. It's funny, here we are. I haven't left the house in a year, and I'm busier than I've ever been. My fingers are in all these pies, and fortunately, it could turn out to be a blessing that we've been put into communicating on the internet instead of having to get on airplanes.
Yeah.
I just feel the power of it. All those things you're saying are just the things that I, think about all the time. And what can we do about that? A good place actually to end. That was a beautiful summary about, what's needed, where we need to go. I asked you to think about some statements that you might make that we've asked everybody, we've asked all of our podcast guests. What is your mission? But what's your work to do? What are you supposed to be doing in the world? What did your directive?
Well, my work is to welcome the beauty within myself and to encourage people to see it within themselves and within everyone else too. I think I have just been taught the pain that comes from not feeling or seeing the beauty in oneself, and the extraordinary light that comes, the freedom that comes from knowing that you have it and that everyone else has it too, no exceptions. That's my mission.
Oh, that's beautiful. I know you've worked with lots of underprivileged youth. What a beautiful thing to instill in them. Absolutely beautiful. And how about a one-line statement to the world?
I think my one-line statement right now is, this is our time. I really think this is our time. This is a moment of great opportunity for change, a hopeful change, healing change, true and good change. I guess if it's one line, it's have faith in yourself, have faith in others. As many times as you may have been discouraged, and as many times as you may have been disappointed by others, try again.
I literally could talk to you forever. I think we have a future somehow, somewhere.
I hope so. And I thank you for all your work. And I thank you for welcoming me to this podcast. And I thank your listeners, because if they're still listening, that means their hearts and souls are open and ready. And I encourage them to grab a copy of The Call to Unite. It's a beautiful book. It's a beautiful book to give to others, maybe those who are in pain in your life, maybe those from whom you've been separated. Maybe we each have a little step we can take to pick up the phone or send a book to someone who is on the outside of our lives, to remind them that we can restore not just our country, but our hope in each other too.
I wish that, we were on video and people could see this beautiful book. And it is a beautiful book. I know we can go online and read on Kindle. I would encourage everybody to have this in your hand.
It's so beautifully designed. I'm so grateful to the people that worked on it. My co-editor, Tom Roshert, my sister, Maria, who published the book. It's a labor of love, and I hope people will find it a place not just in their house, but in their hearts too.
Now Suzanne takes your hand and she leads you to the river.
So, dear listeners, that was my conversation with Tim Shriver. As many people and organizations deal with the challenges we face, there aren't so many who think about the system change we need, which is what I'm focused on. And Tim not only thinks about it, but as you've heard, is devoted to moving the world in that direction. Thank you for tuning in to my Sue Speaks podcast. Do subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. And visit SueSpeaksPodcast.com for notes on what we covered in this episode and for additional information about my guest. Also, I'd love to engage with you there to hear your opinions. How did you feel about what you heard? Did you learn anything, or were you inspired to act in any new way? Or do you have something to add that would let us know what you know? This is a go-to place for people to grab cups of consciousness and fire away.
And you want to travel with her, and you want to travel blind, and you know you can trust her, for she's touched your perfect body with her mind.